It was a normal morning in New York City, just like any other. People were rushing to work, drinking coffee, and checking their phones as they walked down busy streets. Cars honked impatiently, street vendors shouted to sell their goods, and the city buzzed with its usual energy. No one expected anything unusual to happen that day, but sometimes life throws surprises so big that no one can prepare for them. At exactly 8:47 a.m., something strange began to happen. High above Manhattan, the sky started shimmering, almost like heat waves rising from hot pavement on a summer afternoon. At first, people thought it might be some kind of weather phenomenon, or maybe even an optical illusion caused by pollution. Some stopped to look up, squinting against the sunlight, while others ignored it completely, too focused on getting through their daily routines. Then came the sound, a sharp, deafening crack that echoed across the entire city. It was loud enough to make windows rattle and send birds scattering into the air. Everyone froze. Even the traffic seemed to pause as drivers turned off their radios and stepped out of their cars to see what was happening. The source of the noise became clear moments later when the sky appeared to split open. A massive tear formed right in the middle of the blue expanse, revealing darkness beyond. It wasn't night. It was something else entirely. Stars twinkled unnaturally bright behind the rift, and glowing lights moved within the void. Then, slowly but surely, enormous metallic shapes emerged from the opening. They were ships. Gigantic, intimidating spacecraft unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Each ship was shaped like a dagger, bristling with weapons and glowing engines that pulsed with power. People stared in shock, unable to believe their eyes. Phones were pulled out instantly, and videos flooded social media platforms within seconds. Hashtags like Soccer Aliens NYC and End of the World trended globally in minutes. Panic spread quickly as more ships appeared, filling the sky until it looked like a fleet of steel monsters preparing for battle. The silence didn't last long. After a few tense minutes, a cold, mechanical voice boomed from every electronic device nearby: phones, radios, TVs, even car stereos. "Earthlings," the voice said, deep and emotionless. "Surrender your planet." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the crowd. People screamed, ran, or simply collapsed to their knees in despair. Parents grabbed their children and fled toward subway stations, hoping to find shelter underground. Storefronts were abandoned as employees bolted out the doors, leaving cash registers wide open. Chaos reigned supreme. Amid all this madness, inside, a small diner called Joe's Corner Cafe, an old woman sat quietly at a corner table. Her name was Margaret Thompson, and she was sipping her tea, oblivious to the growing panic outside. She had lived a simple life, raising her son alone after her husband passed away decades ago. Now retired, she spent most mornings enjoying breakfast at the same cafe, reading the newspaper and chatting with the staff who knew her well. But today things were different. As news of the alien invasion reached the diner, the atmosphere changed drastically. Customers rushed to leave, shouting and shoving each other in their haste. One man accidentally knocked over Margaret's teacup, spilling hot liquid onto the table. She sighed softly, dabbing at the spill with a napkin. Joe, the manager of the diner, stormed over to her table. He was a short, balding man with a perpetually irritated expression. "Hey, lady," he snapped. "You've been sitting here for over an hour. Are you going to order something or not?" Margaret looked up calmly. "I already ordered tea," she replied gently, "and I'm still drinking it." "Well, we're closing early today," Joe shot back. "There's, an emergency. You need to leave." Margaret frowned slightly but nodded. She reached for her cane and stood up carefully, wincing as pain shot through her leg. Before she could take a step, Joe grabbed her arm roughly and practically dragged her toward the door. Outside, the scene was pure pandemonium. People were running in every direction, screaming about aliens and the end of the world. "Here," Joe muttered, shoving Margaret onto the sidewalk. "Go somewhere else. We don't have time for this." Without another word, he slammed the door shut behind him and locked it. Margaret stumbled forward, clutching her cane tightly. For a moment, she stood there, blinking in confusion as the alien ships loomed ominously overhead. Around her, people pushed past without a second glance, too consumed by fear to notice the frail old woman standing alone in the chaos. Little did anyone know, Margaret wasn't just any ordinary grandmother. She was the mother of Alexander Thompson, one of the richest and most influential men in New York City. Alexander owned half the skyscrapers in Manhattan, several tech companies, and even a private space exploration firm called Stellar Horizon. Though he rarely spoke about his mother publicly, those close to him knew how much he loved and respected her. When news of what happened at the diner reached him later that day, it ignited a firestorm of anger and action that would change everything. For now, however, Margaret was on her own. She adjusted her grip on her cane and took a deep breath. Despite the terror unfolding around her, she remained remarkably calm. Decades of hardship had taught her resilience, and she wasn't about to let a little thing like an alien invasion break her spirit. With determination etched into her face, she began making her way through the crowded streets, heading toward the one place where she knew she'd find safety and answers. As the alien ships continued to hover menacingly above the city, humanity's fate hung precariously in the balance. What no one realized yet was that the key to survival might lie not in the hands of world leaders or military generals, but in the quiet strength of an unassuming old woman named Margaret Thompson. Margaret Thompson moved slowly through the chaos of New York City, her cane tapping against the cracked pavement. The streets were filled with people running in every direction, shouting, crying, or simply staring up at the alien ships that loomed overhead like steel monoliths. Cars screeched to a halt as drivers abandoned their vehicles, leaving them stranded in the middle of intersections. Storefronts were empty, their doors swinging open as employees fled for safety. Despite the panic around her, Margaret remained calm, her expression unreadable beneath layers of wrinkles and wisdom earned over decades of life. She wasn't afraid. Not yet, anyway. Fear was something she had learned to manage long ago when raising her son Alexander alone after her husband passed away. Those years hadn't been easy. Working double shifts at a factory while ensuring Alexander stayed focused on his studies had taught her resilience. Now, standing amidst the greatest crisis humanity had ever faced, she drew upon that same strength. Still, being shoved out of the diner by Joe stung more than she cared to admit. It reminded her of how invisible older people often became in society, dismissed as burdens rather than valued members of the community. But Margaret knew better than anyone that appearances could be deceiving. Unbeknownst to most, including Joe, Margaret's quiet demeanor masked an extraordinary legacy. Her son Alexander Thompson was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in New York City, and perhaps the entire world. From humble beginnings, he had built an empire spanning real estate, technology, and space exploration. His company, Stellar Horizon, was at the forefront of cutting-edge research into defense systems and interstellar travel. Though Alexander rarely spoke about his mother publicly, those who knew him understood just how much he adored her. She was the foundation upon which his success had been built, the guiding force behind his determination to innovate and protect. Back at Stellar Horizon headquarters, located in a sleek skyscraper overlooking Central Park, Alexander was already hard at work. News of the alien invasion had reached him within minutes of the sky splitting open. Like everyone else, he had watched in stunned silence as the massive ships appeared, their cold metallic surfaces glinting ominously under the sun. When the transmission demanding Earth's surrender echoed across all devices, his heart sank, but only for a moment. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Alexander wasted no time activating a secret project codenamed Aegis. For years, Stellar Horizon had been developing a planetary shield system designed to defend Earth against extraterrestrial threats. The project was still experimental, but desperate times called for desperate measures. With the help of his team, Alexander initiated the deployment sequence, sending commands to hidden quantum reactors buried beneath cities worldwide. These reactors would generate a protective barrier capable of deflecting energy weapons and preventing catastrophic damage. As the shield began to form, glowing faintly around Earth's atmosphere, Alexander allowed himself a brief moment of relief. It wouldn't hold forever, especially if the aliens decided to launch a full-scale assault, but it bought humanity some time. Time to think, to strategize, and hopefully to fight back. But even as he worked tirelessly, Alexander couldn't shake thoughts of his mother. He had received a call from one of his assistants moments earlier, informing him of what happened at Joe's Corner Cafe. The news made his blood boil. How dare someone treat his mother that way? Especially now, during such a critical moment. He immediately dispatched a security team to locate her and bring her to safety. Yet deep down, he worried. The city was in turmoil, and finding one elderly woman amidst millions of terrified citizens would be no small feat. Meanwhile, Margaret continued navigating the war-torn streets, her mind sharp despite her frail body. She avoided main roads, sticking to quieter alleys where she could move without being trampled by panicked crowds. Along the way, she noticed acts of both kindness and cruelty. At one point, she saw a young man helping an injured woman into a taxi, refusing payment despite her protests. Moments later, she witnessed two men fighting over a bottle of water outside a convenience store. Humanity's true colors were showing, she thought bitterly. In times of crisis, people either came together or turned on each other. Margaret's destination was clear: Alexander's penthouse apartment atop one of his skyscrapers. She knew he would be there, coordinating efforts to combat the alien threat. Reaching him wouldn't be easy, given the state of the city, but she refused to give up. Every step brought her closer, though her leg ached with each movement. As she walked, memories flooded her mind. She remembered teaching Alexander how to ride a bicycle when he was 6, steadying him as he wobbled down the driveway. She recalled staying up late with him during high school, quizzing him on math problems until he finally mastered them. And she thought of the day he graduated from college, tears streaming down her face as he hugged her tightly and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." Those moments had shaped the man he was today, a brilliant innovator driven by a desire to protect others. By mid-afternoon, Margaret reached the edge of Central Park. Smoke rose from several parts of the city, carried by the wind, and the distant sound of explosions grew louder. Alien drones zipped through the sky, firing beams of light that struck buildings and sent debris flying. People screamed and scattered, seeking cover wherever they could find it. Margaret pressed herself against a tree trunk, catching her breath as another blast shook the ground. Just then she heard a voice calling her name. Turning cautiously, she saw a familiar face emerging from the shadows. It was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a former astrophysicist turned conspiracy theorist whom Margaret had met at several scientific conferences over the years. Elena had always been fascinated by Alexander's work, often asking Margaret questions about his latest projects. "Mrs. Thompson," Elena exclaimed, rushing toward her. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here?" "I'm fine," Margaret replied, straightening. "But just trying to get to my son's place." Elena's eyes widened. "You mean Alexander? I've been trying to reach him. I think I know why these aliens are here. It's not what everyone thinks." Margaret frowned. "What do you mean?" Elena glanced around nervously before lowering her voice. "They're not invaders, they're refugees. I intercepted some signals using amateur radio equipment. These aliens are fleeing something far worse, a galactic entity called the Void. If we can communicate with them, maybe we can turn this disaster into an alliance." For a moment, Margaret said nothing, processing the information. Then, she nodded firmly. "We need to tell Alexander. Come on, I'll take you to him." Together, the unlikely pair set off toward Alexander's skyscraper. As they navigated the devastated city, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just an old woman anymore. She was a messenger carrying vital knowledge that could change the course of humanity's future, and she wouldn't let anything or anyone stand in her way. Little did she know, her journey was far from over. The road ahead would test her strength, courage, and resolve. But if there was one thing Margaret Thompson understood, it was this: sometimes the smallest actions could spark the greatest changes. The alien fleet didn't waste any time testing Earth's newfound defenses. Moments after the shimmering barrier of Aegis enveloped the planet, Glowing beams of energy shot down from the massive star destroyers hovering above. Each blast struck the shield with a blinding flash, sending shockwaves rippling across its surface. For a tense few seconds, humanity held its collective breath, unsure whether the experimental system would hold. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the energy beams dissipated harmlessly into space, leaving the shield intact. Cheers erupted in cities around the world as people realized they had a fighting chance. Social media exploded with videos and posts celebrating the miraculous protection. "We're safe," became the rallying cry of millions, fueling hope that humanity might survive this unprecedented invasion. But Alexander Thompson, standing in his high-tech command center at Stellar Horizon headquarters, knew better than to celebrate too soon. The aliens weren't about to give up so easily, not when surrender meant their survival. "They'll regroup," he muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the holographic displays showing real-time data on the shield's status. This was just the beginning. His team nodded grimly, their faces pale but determined. They were some of the brightest minds in engineering and astrophysics, handpicked by Alexander for projects like Aegis. Now, they worked tirelessly to reinforce the shield while simultaneously analyzing the alien technology being used against them. Every second counted. Sure enough, the invaders adjusted their strategy. Instead of firing concentrated beams directly at the shield, they deployed swarms of smaller attack drones. Sleek and agile, these machines darted through the atmosphere, targeting weak points in the shield and attempting to breach it from multiple angles. Explosions rocked cities as the drones unleashed chaos on civilian areas, destroying buildings, infrastructure, and lives. Alexander clenched his fists as reports poured in detailing the devastation, despite the shield holding strong overall. Localized breaches allowed the drones to wreak havoc before retreating back into the sky. Casualties mounted rapidly, and panic spread once again among survivors. Governments scrambled to respond, mobilizing military forces to combat the mechanical menace, but conventional weapons proved largely ineffective against the advanced alien tech. Back in the streets of Manhattan, Margaret and Elena pressed onward toward Alexander's skyscraper. The journey grew increasingly perilous as explosions lit up the skyline and debris rained down around them. At one point, a nearby building collapsed, sending a cloud of dust and rubble billowing toward them. Margaret stumbled, her cane slipping from her grasp, but Elena caught her arm just in time. "Are you all right?" Elena asked, helping Margaret regain her footing. "I'm fine," Margaret replied, brushing herself off. Her voice was calm despite the danger surrounding them. "Let's keep moving. We can't afford to stop now." Elena marveled at the old woman's resilience. Despite her age and frailty, Margaret moved with purpose, driven by an unshakable determination to reach her son. Along the way, they encountered both acts of kindness and moments of despair. In one alley, they found a group of survivors huddled together, sharing food and water salvaged from a nearby grocery store. When Margaret explained who she was and where she was headed, the group offered to escort her partway, shielding her from falling debris and stray drone attacks. "You're doing something important," one of the men said as they parted ways. "Good luck, ma'am. Tell your son we're counting on him." Margaret smiled faintly, touched by the gesture. It reminded her of why Alexander had dedicated his life to innovation, to protect people like these, ordinary citizens caught in extraordinary circumstances. By late afternoon, Margaret and Elena finally reached the base of Alexander's skyscraper. The towering structure stood tall amidst the destruction, its glass facade reflecting the eerie glow of the alien ships above. Security personnel stationed outside immediately recognized Margaret and escorted her inside, guiding her toward the elevator that led to Alexander's penthouse office. When the doors opened on the top floor, Alexander was waiting. He rushed forward, his face lighting up with relief as he saw his mother standing there, battered but alive. "Mom!" he exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down his face as he held her close. "I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, Alex," Margaret assured him, patting his back gently. "But there's no time for tears right now. We have work to do." Stepping back, she introduced Elena, who quickly explained her theory about the aliens fleeing. The void. Alexander listened intently, his brow furrowing as he processed the information. If true, it changed everything. These weren't ruthless conquerors. They were desperate refugees seeking sanctuary. We need to communicate with them, Alexander said firmly. If we can prove we understand their plight, maybe we can negotiate a truce. With renewed focus, Alexander instructed his team to analyze intercepted signals and develop a way to broadcast a message directly to the alien fleet. Meanwhile, he ordered reinforcements for the shield, prioritizing repairs to damaged sections caused by the relentless drone attacks. As night fell over the city, the battle continued to rage. Alien drones zipped through the air, dodging missiles fired by human fighter jets and retaliating with devastating precision. Fires burned brightly in the distance, painting the horizon orange and red. Yet amidst the chaos, hope flickered like a candle in the dark. Thanks to Aegis and Alexander's leadership, humanity wasn't giving up without a fight. In a quiet corner of the command center, Margaret sat watching the monitors, her expression thoughtful. She thought about the journey she'd taken that day, from being thrown out of a diner to becoming a key player in humanity's survival. Life had a funny way of surprising you, she mused. Sometimes even the smallest actions could spark the greatest changes. And as she looked at her son, leading the charge against an impossible foe, she felt a surge of pride. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't alone in this fight. Together, with courage, ingenuity, and a little bit of luck, they might just stand a chance. The night was long and grueling, but the efforts of Alexander Thompson and his team began to bear fruit. By dawn, they had successfully decoded fragments of the alien transmissions intercepted by Dr. Elena Rodriguez. The messages painted a chilling picture. The invaders weren't here to conquer Earth. They were running from something far more terrifying. According to the signals, an entity known as the Void was consuming entire star systems, leaving nothing but emptiness in its wake. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their planets reduced to cosmic dust. These aliens were refugees, seeking sanctuary wherever they could find it, including Earth. Alexander paced the command center, his mind racing with possibilities. If humanity could communicate this understanding to the aliens, perhaps a truce could be negotiated. But how? The language barrier was immense, and the aliens' cold mechanical demeanor suggested they wouldn't trust humans easily. Still, he knew they had no choice but to try. Every second wasted meant more lives lost, more destruction inflicted upon innocent people. We need to send them a message, Alexander said firmly, turning to his team. Something simple but clear, something that shows we understand their situation. Elena stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with determination. I've identified specific frequencies they seem to use for communication, she explained. If we broadcast our message on those channels, there's a chance they'll hear us. Margaret, seated nearby, nodded approvingly. She may not have understood the technical details, but she trusted her son and Elena to do what needed to be done. Her presence in the room served as a quiet reminder of why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for unity and compassion. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it had the potential to rise above fear and hatred when faced with a common enemy. With everyone working together, the message was crafted carefully. It consisted of basic symbols and mathematical patterns designed to convey peace and cooperation. Embedded within it was information about Earth's resources and willingness to help if the aliens ceased their attacks. Using Stellar Horizon's advanced broadcasting equipment, Alexander transmitted the signal directly to the alien fleet. At first, there was no response. The drones continued their relentless assault, striking cities and testing the limits of Aegis. Doubts crept into the minds of Alexander's team. Had the aliens even received the message? Or worse, did they simply not care? Then, unexpectedly, the attacks stopped. The drones froze mid-air, hovering silently as if awaiting orders. Moments later, one of the massive star destroyers descended, closer to Earth, positioning itself above Manhattan. A beam of light shot down from the ship, creating a glowing platform in the middle of Central Park. Standing atop it was a lone figure, an alien emissary. Its body was sleek and metallic, with elongated limbs and a faceless head that shimmered like liquid mercury. News of the aliens' arrival spread quickly, drawing crowds of curious onlookers despite the danger. Soldiers surrounded the park, weapons drawn, ready to defend against any sudden moves. Inside the command center, Alexander watched the scene unfold on live feeds, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. "I'm going down there," he announced suddenly. His team protested immediately. "It's too risky," one engineer shouted. "What if it's a trap?" "I don't have a choice," Alexander replied, his voice steady. "If we want to end this, someone has to take the first step. Besides," he glanced at Margaret, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Sometimes courage is the only weapon we have." Dressed in protective gear provided by his security team, Alexander made his way to Central Park. As he approached the glowing platform, the alien emissary turned to face him, its movements fluid and deliberate. For a moment, neither side moved. Then through a device strapped to its chest, the alien spoke. Not in words, but in a series of melodic tones accompanied by holographic projections. To everyone's astonishment, Elena stepped forward, translating the message in real time. "They're asking why we reached out," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "They thought we were hostile because of our initial resistance." Alexander took a deep breath and responded calmly, using gestures and symbols displayed on a handheld tablet. "We misunderstood each other," he conveyed. "Your ships appeared suddenly, demanding surrender. We acted out of fear. But now we know you're fleeing something greater, a threat called the Void. We offer our help if you stop attacking us." The alien paused, its shimmering form rippling as if processing the information. After a tense silence, it projected another series of images, maps of galaxies, depictions of destruction, and finally a symbol resembling a handshake. "They accept," Elena whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They agreed to negotiate." Cheers erupted among the soldiers and onlookers gathered around the park. Cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the historic event worldwide. For the first time since the invasion began, hope surged through humanity. Perhaps peace was possible, after all. Back at Stellar Horizon headquarters, Margaret watched the unfolding drama on a monitor, tears streaming down her face. She had always believed in her son's ability to make a difference, but seeing him stand face to face with an alien emissary felt surreal. His courage reminded her of the boy who used to dream big dreams under the stars, promising her he'd change the world someday. Over the next few days, negotiations progressed cautiously. Alien representatives met with human leaders aboard a neutral orbital platform facilitated by Alexander's diplomatic efforts. Scientists from both sides exchanged knowledge, sharing insights about technology, biology, and the nature of the Void. It became clear that defeating this galactic menace would require collaboration. Earth alone couldn't handle such a threat. Plans were drawn up for joint missions into deep space. Margaret found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From being dismissed as insignificant to becoming a catalyst for unity, she realized that even the smallest actions mattered. Her decision to keep moving forward despite the odds had sparked a chain reaction that changed the course of history. In the end, humanity emerged stronger, not just because of its technological advancements, but because of its capacity to adapt, empathize, and work together. And though challenges lay ahead, Margaret knew they would face them as one. After all, sometimes the greatest victories came not from strength or power, but from the quiet determination to never give up. The negotiations between humanity and the alien refugees marked a turning point in Earth's history. What began as an invasion rooted in desperation transformed into an unprecedented alliance against a shared enemy, the enigmatic entity known as the Void. The aliens, who called themselves the Valens, revealed that the Void was not just a destructive force but something far more insidious. It consumed entire star systems by unraveling the fabric of space-time itself, leaving behind nothingness where once thriving worlds existed. Entire civilizations had fallen victim to its hunger, their pleas for help unanswered until now. Alexander Thompson played a pivotal role in bridging the gap between humans and Veylons. His expertise in advanced technology and his ability to think creatively made him indispensable during the planning stages of their joint mission. Working alongside Elena Rodriguez, he helped decode critical data about the Void's patterns and weaknesses. Meanwhile, Margaret quietly supported her son, offering wisdom born from years of experience, though she wasn't directly involved. In the technical discussions, her presence reminded everyone of the importance of resilience and unity. As preparations intensified, the combined forces of humanity and the Veylons constructed a massive interstellar weapon codenamed Eclipse. Designed to emit a concentrated pulse capable of destabilizing the Void's core structure, Eclipse represented the culmination of both species' knowledge and ingenuity. However, deploying it required traveling deep into uncharted regions of space, a perilous journey fraught with unknown dangers. Volunteers were needed to crew the expeditionary fleet, and thousands stepped forward despite the risks. Among them were soldiers, scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens driven by a desire to protect their planet and future generations. Alexander insisted on leading the mission personally, refusing to ask others to face danger he wouldn't confront himself. Margaret tried to dissuade him initially, fearing for his safety, but ultimately relented when she saw the determination in his eyes. "You've always been brave, Alex," she told him one evening before departure. "Just promise me you'll come back." "I will, Mom," he replied, hugging her tightly. "This isn't goodbye. It's just see you soon." The launch day arrived under somber skies. Crowds gathered at designated viewing areas around the globe to watch as the human Veylan fleet ascended into orbit. Dozens of sleek spacecraft glided through Earth's atmosphere, accompanied by cheers and tears from those below. For many, this marked the beginning of hope after weeks of fear and uncertainty. Once in space, the fleet traveled toward coordinates provided by the Veylons, regions where the Void had recently devastated neighboring star systems. Along the Yar Way, tensions ran high. Crew members struggled to adapt to living alongside beings so different from themselves. Misunderstandings arose frequently, testing the fragile bond forged during negotiations. Yet time and again, acts of kindness bridged the divide. A Veylan engineer repaired a damaged human ship without hesitation, while a human medic saved the life of an injured Veylan soldier. Slowly but surely, trust began to grow. Finally, the fleet reached their destination, a desolate expanse littered with the remnants of destroyed planets. In the distance loomed the Void, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed alive, pulsating with malevolent energy. Ships shuddered as they approached, their systems disrupted by the chaotic forces emanating from within. Despite the ominous sight, there was no turning back. "Activate Eclipse," Alexander commanded over the comms system, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. Technicians aboard each vessel synchronized, their efforts powering up the weapon to its maximum capacity. As beams of light converged into a single blinding pulse, the fleet unleashed Eclipse directly at the Void's core. For several agonizing moments, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar that reverberated across space, the Void began to collapse in on itself. Its tendrils retracted violently, consuming less territory than before. Cheers erupted throughout the fleet as sensors confirmed the success of the operation. Though weakened, the Void remained active, retreating to deeper reaches of the galaxy. But the victory was undeniable. It had been pushed back, giving countless worlds a fighting chance to survive. Returning to Earth, the heroes of the mission were greeted as saviors. Parades were held in their honor, speeches delivered praising their bravery, and monuments erected to commemorate their sacrifice. Humanity celebrated not only its triumph over a galactic threat, but also the newfound partnership with the Veylons. Together they vowed to continue working toward a brighter future, free from fear of annihilation. For Margaret, the celebrations felt bittersweet. While proud of her son's achievements, she couldn't shake the memory of being dismissed as insignificant during the early days of the invasion. That experience had taught her an important lesson. Society often overlooked those who appeared powerless, failing to recognize the strength hidden beneath humble exteriors. Determined to ensure such injustices didn't happen again, she used her influence, bolstered by Alexander's wealth and connections, to establish shelters and support networks for elderly individuals and marginalized communities. 1 year later, Earth stood stronger and more united than ever. Cities rebuilt, economies stabilized, and scientific advancements accelerated thanks to collaboration with the Valons. At the heart of it all was Alexander, whose leadership inspired millions to dream bigger and aim higher. And beside him stood Margaret, a quiet yet steadfast reminder that even the smallest actions could spark the greatest changes. Late one evening, as mother and son sat together in Alexander's penthouse overlooking New York City, Margaret gazed out at the glittering skyline. The scars of war were still visible, cranes repairing damaged buildings, streets lined with memorials, but hope burned brightly in every corner. "You know," she said softly, breaking the silence, "I never imagined my little boy would grow up to save the world." Alexander chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "And I never imagined I'd do it because you refused to give up, Mom." They shared a smile, content in the knowledge that their journey, filled with challenges, heartbreaks, and triumphs, had shaped the course of history. Sometimes the most extraordinary outcomes stemmed from the simplest beginnings, and sometimes an old woman's quiet determination could change the fate of an entire planet.